Today is Wednesday, January 10th, and we are in Manta, Ecuador. Manta is the fifth most populous city in Ecuador with about 200,000 inhabitants, and it's also the largest seaport in Ecuador. We decided to head off on our own today and found a local taxi driver who spoke almost no English to drive us around the city. We cruised through the downtown area, checking everything out, and then drove down along the seaside where they were making ships by hand, the old-fashioned way, which was pretty cool to see. The tourist maps that we had showed that there were several spectacular beaches along the coast outside the city. We managed to communicate to our taxi driver that we wanted to drive out to 3 or 4 of them, so we took off outside of the town and found that it was basically a desert. It was hot and dry and sandy, but the beaches themselves were awesome. After a few hours of exploring, we headed back into town and spent the rest of the day at a beach within sight of our ship. We had lots of fun swimming and sunning and playing in the waves. The water temperatures were in the 80s, so it was like soaking in a bathtub. It was so wonderful. When we returned to the ship, we spent some time on the dock watching the locals unload the tuna boats. Tuna fishing is the largest industry in Manta, and we watched them literally unload hundreds of the huge tunas from a long line of tuna boats into another long line of dump trucks. Our chef from the ship went down on the dock and negotiated with some of the local guys and bought fish right off the boat and served them to the passengers the next day. Can't get any fresher than that. As we pulled away from Manta, we were given a nice send-off by a school of dolphins playing in our ship's wake.
Oh, right here some more. There they are. Oh, a baby one.
And for the travel quote of the day, The world is a book, and those who do not travel read only one page. St. Augustine. Today is Thursday, January 11th, and we are in Guayaquil, Ecuador. Guayaquil is the largest city in Ecuador with about 2.5 million people, and it's located about 40 miles up the Guayas River, which empties into the Gulf of Guayaquil on the Pacific Ocean. The ship had arranged for some buses to take the passengers into the city, where they dropped us off at the Cathedral Metropolita de Guayaquil, which was next to the Parque Seminario, or as the locals call it, the Iguana Park. The cathedral was built in the early 20th century in a neoclassical style. The church has two towers that finish in Gothic needles beneath a statue that is dedicated to Santiago el Mayor. The center of the facade has a rosette stained glass window that filters light into the interior of the temple. The portal of the temple has a pointed arch that has 4 bas-reliefs representing a bull, an angel, an eagle, and a lion, all with wings, and also a book that symbolizes the emblems of will, knowledge, silence, and boldness. Across the street from the cathedral is Seminario Park that is filled with iguanas that beg from the tourists, kind of like uglier versions of squirrels. We took some time to feed some lettuce to the iguanas before Tony approached some of the large contingency of police officers around the park to see if they could get him connected to the internet, which they did. We spent the next hour or so sitting on a bench cleaning up our email. We have found that the ship's internet is not too good, and the first thing all the passengers do when they get off the ship is try to find free Wi-Fi. Before we left the park, we hunted down our first Peruvian geocache. After we left the park, we took a walk down to the Malecon 2000, which is a 1-mile-long waterfront avenue that runs parallel to the river Guayacus, where we viewed the La Rotenda Monument and some other sculptures that are laid out along the walk. We sat on the bench for a while and watched a fisherman fishing the river using handmade nets and a little tiny boat. I imagine that's the way his forefathers fished that river 100 years ago. On the way back to the bus pickup location, we walked past the government buildings, which is kind of like our courthouse. Then we grabbed the shuttle bus back to the ship and had a nice chat with the bus hostess, who gave us an impromptu lowdown on the city. She had been to the United States before and had spent some time in Wisconsin and was happy to practice her English on us. At the end of the day, after we left port, we had 40 miles of viewing the river before we got to the Pacific Ocean. And then, as we were leaving port, we got a beautiful display of flying fish all over the place. And our travel quote for the day is, "Travel makes one modest. You see what a tiny place you occupy in the world." Gustav Flaubert.